So maybe let's jump right in, because like we have such reverence for nature, and I know. I was listening to you, and you say that you in one of your lectures, one of your college lectures, which you used to do, the first 6 weeks were spent on one question. The question was, "What is nature?" And I wonder,
Yes, right.
what was obviously. It's such a complex question, and there's so many facets to it, and your experience are so vast. But how would you answer that question?
Yes,
Today, really,
that's so
today.
difficult. You see, the problem is, of course, we use the word nature very easily. But when you start to ask people, and what do you mean when you use the word nature, then it becomes complex. It's just like a word like love, easily used. When we try to analyze what we really mean, it becomes rather complicated. The same with the word nature. And, there's two extremes. For some people, nature is that domain that has not been impacted upon by humans. That what is there outside our influence. And that's basically the classical Western approach, because the word nature comes from the Latin natura, and that meant that which develops itself on its own, outside human impact. And that was then opposed to the concept cultura, or culture. So for most Westerners, nature is that what is outside our world. But then we have immediately a problem. What about us? Are we humans nature? I mean, we are also an animal. So, and then usually people say, oh yeah. We of course are also nature. And then I always ask the question, okay, but then if an anthill is nature, is a city then nature too? Ants, humans, animals, all nature. And then people start to become very confused. Oh no, a city is not nature. You get where I'm getting at? You see, what we've done in the West since basically classical times, we've separated nature and culture, and at first view that is very easy. We have human culture and nature is out there, but when you then start to ask questions about, okay, where is the dividing line? Where does nature end and culture begin? And the other way around. And suddenly it's not clear anymore. Now, other cultures have a much more simple answer. They say, nature is everything. In China, in classical times, the characters that you use to basically describe nature in a Western, let's say, use of the word, the three characters, heaven, human, earth. And the answer is very, very simple. Everything. So what I'm trying to say, that your definition of nature is contextual. It depends very much on where you are in the world, what culture you are in, etc., etc., etc. So if you ask me, what do you see as nature? I would say, in a way, I feel nature is everything, and we are part of nature. And as one fascinating philosopher said in the last century, we humans are not a phenomenon in this world. We humans are a phenomenon of this world. And that means that I see myself as a phenomenon of nature.
I love
Does that make any sense?
Totally.
Yeah.
It's like a paradigm shift. It's instead of seeing, like, I think I was looking at maybe it's the Oxford Dictionary or one of them, where they kind of, nature is all that happens outside a human. Whereas what you're talking, and which I really admire, is that we're all intrinsically linked. There's no separation.
Absolutely.
We are nature. Nature is us. It's all one side of the same coin, or it's all intrinsically
and
united.
then even in that definition, so we are part of nature. where does, like, and this is bringing in your spiritual context and Buddhism and spiritual philosophy. My question is more about, like, so if we are part of nature, and I see, like, for example, in when tsunamis are coming, usually the animals just move up the mountains. They move up the hills, and it's not because they know the wave is coming. It's just they just move up the mountain. I don't know why. They're part of nature. Whereas us humans, I think we've lost that sense of connection to nature.
Absolutely.
And I wonder, where does the human ego start, and where does the human, like the nature part of human, maybe it's the intuition, like where is the separation? Because, like, I believe you, we are part of nature, but when I walk around, you know, in most of modern societies, it doesn't feel like we're natural nature. Like we can't sit still. Like I look at my cats and they can just sit there looking out the window all day. And I can't sit still for 20 minutes reading a book. You know, it's like it just, our nature has changed. And my question is a bit of a rant, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
No, but you used an interesting word, the word ego.
Yeah.
And as soon as the ego enters the stage, separation starts. Because the ego can only maintain itself by separating itself from the environment. It's my ego, and there's something out there that's different. You get my drift?
Yeah.
So the moment the ego starts to speak, there is separation, divided. We are becoming divided from the world around us. Our ego has thought itself separate from the rest of the world. There's a Vietnamese philosopher, Thich Nhat Hanh, he died last year, whom I greatly admired. And then in one of his books, when you open it up, he was a Buddhist philosopher. The first page reads as follows: when you are a poet, you see a cloud floating in this sheet of paper. Because without clouds, there's no rain. Without rain, trees cannot grow, and we do not have paper. Looking deeper, you see sunshine in this sheet of paper. Without sunshine, trees will not grow. We have no paper. Looking deeper still, you see a woodcutter in this sheet of paper. The woodcutter cut a tree, brought it to the factory, where the tree became paper. Looking deeper still, you see the woodcutter's parents. They're also in this paper. Otherwise, there would have been no woodcutter. Looking deeper still, you see grain that became the daily bread of the woodcutter who cut a tree, brought it to the factory, where it became paper. And ultimately, you now also see yourself in this sheet of paper. The paper has become part of your consciousness, so you are also in and with this paper. And then he says, in short, there's nothing I can point at that's not here and now, in and with this sheet of paper. Time, space, rain, sunshine, a woodcutter, a tree. And then he says, therefore, I suggest that we replace the verb to be. Because the verb to be suggests and implies that things and beings can exist independent of the world around. I am. You too are. But, says Thich Nhat Hanh, nothing and no one exists independent of the world. So he suggests a new verb, to interbe. I inter am, you inter are, and this house inter is. And that's a fascinating philosophy, which, by the way, is not just a philosophy. Science proves this. We know this from ecology. We know this from physics. We know this in sociology. We know this in psychology. None of us exists independent of the world around us. Only our conceptualization and our images and ideas and thoughts about our ego separate us. I have an ego, separate from the rain and the sunshine and nature and the other. That's just a thought, a wrong image of reality that causes a lot of pain and suffering, because you always have to maintain this ego and this idea of an independent self that you need to continue and protect and whatever. Whereas in Reality doesn't exist.
I love that. I inter-am and we inter-are.
Yes.
Like it's
and you too should know that very well.
Well, we've intrinsically known this since the day we were, one egg that split into two.
Exactly.
Till the day that there was reference that we were aware. That's just such an incredible way of thinking.
For example, Mom used to always tell a story that she'd put us up in separate cots, and she'd close the door and she'd leave. And she'd go downstairs and she'd come back up an hour later, and as little, babies, we managed to move our two cots together, climb up so that we were both in the same cot on top of each other.
If we would do this with every other living being in this world, we wouldn't have all the crises that we're in. The great crises of this time, of this day and age, are loss of biodiversity, climate crisis, environmental crisis, pandemics. And what are they caused by? By our idea that we as human individuals, but also as a species, are independent of the world that we're in. Where we have started to use the world as a storehouse of resources and space to be colonized, instead of being like you two, moving the cots together. If we would do that, the world would be a different place.